Bit of an unstructured ramble today. I hope it makes at least a little sense, and if you're a No Man's Sky player, I'd love to hear your perspective. First, however, let the record show I actually really like No Man's Sky. In fact, I'm kind of a hipster because I liked it before it was cool. Well, sort of. I first played the PlayStation 4 version a little after the Pathfinder expansion was released, which was about 7 months after initial launch. At that time, some of the worst and most user-unfriendly elements had been ironed out, and the slow trickle of new features that would eventually lead to No Man's Sky being called one of the greatest redemption stories in gaming history had begun. But the game was still fundamentally what it was at launch, a slow, meditative experience, shallow and unexciting, and really rather limited. And yet I personally was hooked. I liked the simplicity of it, I even liked the repetitiveness of it. It all added to that meditative, zen-like pleasure. I would spend hours mining, gathering plants, scanning wildlife, and yeah, occasionally I would feel like my life was slipping through my fingers, but I tend to feel that regardless of what I'm doing. Slowly, ever so slowly, I upgraded my exosuit. After many hours, I managed to cobble together enough credits to buy a new spaceship. And then I spent many more hours hopping from planet to planet, collecting star bulbs and cactus flesh, crafting them into more valuable items and then selling them on the open market. After what seemed like an eternity, I had enough money to buy a freighter of my own. It's quite possible this was not the quickest way to make money at the time, it certainly isn't now, but just the cycle of collecting, crafting and selling was appealing to me, and getting that freighter was a truly satisfying moment. I used it to, well, build my own spaceborne cactus farm, and my profits soared. Not that I really had anything in mind to spend it on, I was just in it for the joy of being an intergalactic farmer. In the end, I even got the Platinum Trophy, which isn't exactly a huge achievement. You really just get it by playing the game normally for long enough. I got to the centre of the galaxy and experienced the famously controversial ending that's not an ending. Eventually I put the game aside for a while. More patches came out, and after a while my curiosity had been piqued enough to boot up No Man's Sky once again. I found a universe that was greatly changed, and changed for the better in any objective sense. A lot had been added, and the game experience was smoother and just all round more pleasant to be in. But everything I had achieved had been pretty much negated. My previous valuable freighter was now incredibly run-of-the-mill, something that any new player could acquire almost as soon as starting the game. My cactus farm was pointless. Most of my achievements had been deprecated. However, this is not my main problem with No Man's Sky. In fact, I didn't really mind all that much at the time. My in-game achievements were what they were. They were of their time and were not diminished by the fact that now anyone could have a freighter or make money more effectively. I'm not the sort of gamer who feels that kind of jealousy or resentment. And ultimately I was glad to have an excuse to start the game again, this time on PC, where better performance and keyboard and mouse controls made the game even more pleasant. I spent dozens more hours on the game and greatly enjoyed it. But, perhaps naturally, my interest just couldn't be sustained as long as it had been the first time around, and I took a break for a while. More expansions came out, and so when I came back, once again things had changed. New stuff had been added, and because a lot of the new stuff built on other new stuff, albeit older new stuff, it was all a bit confusing and overwhelming for me. Just like that sentence about older new stuff probably was for you. Basically what it boiled down to was that the sheer number of new game systems, items, plot points and other miscellany that had been added to No Man's Sky meant that I felt lost, but not in the cool intergalactic stranger in a strange land kind of lost. So I just started a new game, again. But now the whole experience of those opening sections of the game, getting your first starship upgrades, crafting basic tools, the opening story elements, attaining a modest income, learning those damn languages word by word, it all started to wear a bit thin. But there's no quick and easy way to skip all that, and I would have been hesitant to skip it anyway, in case I missed some important new tutorial or starting quest for a recently introduced gameplay element. So this time I got bored even quicker, and quit before I'd even encountered most of the new stuff. Years passed. More and more expansions and updates and patches were released at a breakneck speed. Barely a month or two would pass without something substantial being added. Sean Murray went from reviled hate figure to saint of the game dev world. I always thought the condemnation of him personally was too much, but the sainthood is well deserved. All this extra content, all of it free, and the fans seem to love it. By this time though, I couldn't really call myself a fan, not like I was back when the game was in its much maligned infancy. I still had the game installed. Every time a patch happened it would auto-install and I'd consider diving back in. Occasionally I did even load up the game and start a fresh save file, but every time I did, I gave up within the hour. What was stopping me was the thought that, well, is this the right time to make the jump back into the vast universe of No Man's Sky? Am I just going to get 20 or 30 hours in and some game-changing feature will be introduced that negates a lot of what I've done? Am I just going to get bored again before I even get to any of the new features and quit for another 2 years, by which time the giant array of new and baffling stuff will have grown even larger, making the barrier for re-entry even harder to cross? It just didn't seem worthwhile persisting. Then, a week or so ago, Update 5.0 was released. Called Worlds, this update was touted as being one of the biggest and most comprehensive so far. Years had elapsed since the last time I'd made a serious effort to get back into No Man's Sky, so perhaps I thought this was a decent opportunity. So I played it, and I enjoyed playing it. In fact, at time of writing, I'm still enjoying playing it, having put another 10 hours or so into yet another new save file. I've redone all the things I've done in the past, the mining, the upgrading, the scanning of countless wild beasts, which seems to be the best way to get currency these days, at the point I'm at least. But I still haven't really interacted with any of the stuff that's been introduced in the several years since I last played No Man's Sky extensively. And this is at least partially due to the way it's been implemented. A lot of the new stuff, the elements that were implemented during my long absences, weren't added in as a new form of progression. There's no natural play sequence you go through to get to them, they're just there, as features you can interact with, or not. The new multiplayer elements, the expeditions, squadrons, the new freighter mechanics, the game hasn't really given me any incentive to engage with them. No Man's Sky is too fundamentally open, too broad and unstructured to really accommodate incentives beyond slightly more efficient resource gathering. The developers have taken an approach to updating No Man's Sky that's more appropriate to an MMO, where content is drip-fed to ensure players keep paying that monthly subscription fee. But No Man's Sky is not an MMO, not in the same sense as World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy XIV at least, even though the multiplayer aspect is now extensive. With WoW or FF14, there's a lot of variety in the goals you can set out to achieve, but no matter what path you choose, the goals are clear and the path towards them is well delineated, and that's not the case in No Man's Sky. What I really want, ultimately, is a goal, an endpoint. I don't care if it's a very difficult goal to reach, I don't care if it requires an amount of time and dedication that I will never give to the game, I just want to know it's out there and achievable. I want to be able to complete No Man's Sky, and I want No Man's Sky to be completed. Back when I first played the game, it actually had an ending of sorts, even though reaching the centre of the galaxy subverted all expectations of what an ending could, and perhaps should, be. But with the game in its current state, that goal of reaching the centre is such a small part of the experience that it's basically trivial. And really that's a good thing in most ways, but I just wish that non-ending had been superseded by an ending more final and more satisfying. What I don't want is to invest many more dozens of hours, put the game down, and then feel compelled to start all over again when I pick it up again. I want to stress that I'm not really criticising the game, this is just my perspective. The openness, the lack of structure, that's part of the appeal for many people. And for me too, it was part of the appeal, but eventually I found I really wanted something else. And I know it might seem odd to be put off by a game because it has too much to offer, but really it's not the amount of content that I find off-putting, it's not even the quality of the content, it's the way it's been stuffed without structure or logical sequence into a game that, in my opinion, was starting to feel bloated some time ago. I honestly believe they could, and perhaps should, have taken a few years off releasing new content and instead packaged every new update and gameplay element into a completely separate product, a No Man's Sky 2. It would have given both the players and developers a clean slate to build a new experience upon, and I would have been willing to pay for it. I suspect many other players would have too. I kind of rolled my eyes when I saw that the full name of this latest update was Worlds Part 1. The developers are far from done with No Man's Sky, it seems. And in most ways that's admirable, and their motives are good. Certainly they've earned enough goodwill to ensure that their next game, the relatively recently announced Light No Fire, has every chance of success and will not be tainted by No Man's Sky's initial reception. But sometimes I feel like tweeting at Sean Murray, telling him, "It's enough, you've done enough, we forgive you, and now it's time to move on."